Hey fam, I've got a guided reading for you today. Feel free as I'm talking to go ahead and gaze at the cards to see if any symbolism stands out for you. Certain things may resonate more, certain things may resonate less. Not a big deal. As long as you are growing, that is the important part. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Guiding our reading today, we have the fairy who was kissed by the pixies. All right, this card very much brings up the energy of love, loving your way to enlightenment, the feeling of connection, the feeling of community, feeling supported, feeling like you are valuable and part of something bigger. Okay. Maybe you have been feeling, at rock bottom lately. Maybe you've kind of felt like, a little bit devastated with the Ten of Swords, right? You've gotten down, you're really feeling like you've hit, the bottom. The thing about this, though, with the Ten of Swords is there's no way to go but up from here, right? We don't have an 11 of Swords. We would just jump straight into the court cards. So starting out with this 10 of Swords tells me that, yes, you may have found yourself in a situation or experience of yourself where you felt negative or you felt like hopeless, but this is the point that you can actually move into a new level of hope from, that you can move into, some kind of a level of joy. Next up is the Fool. Okay, the Fool brings this freshness. You're starting something new, right? The old thing had to end. Maybe whatever it was that you are feeling down about, whatever it is that you are feeling some kind of struggle or difficulty about, had to end in order for you to be able to step into something fresh and something new as the Fool, right? You have this playfulness, right? He's got the bubbles that he's playing with, this joy, this inspiration, this ability for you to kind of step into the new without expectations of, am I going to experience this? Am I going to experience that, right? You can let go of any of the struggles you've had and just open yourself up to new possibilities. This is a reborn, kind of a renewed type of a joy, right? We have the Sun, okay? The Sun is similar to the Fool, but there's not a naivety to the Sun. This is like a, you've experienced whatever you've had to deal with in life, but then you've chosen to step back into joy. You've chosen to be reborn. You think of you coming out of winter, right? That spring type of energy, moving into the summer type of energy. This is a renewed sense of joy. So right now, even if you have come from this point of pain or, whatever the difficulty or struggle, you're being encouraged to, come into this energy of spring, to renew your joy, to open yourself back up to possibilities, to love, right? And this is what's going to help you to be able to move forward, right? The Chariot. When we think of the Chariot and the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the charioteer is actually, they're stopped outside of an old city, that old way of life, that old way of being, that death has swept through, that no longer serves. You can take this moment, this pause, to kind of orient yourself to be able to move forward towards something more beautiful, towards something good for yourself. Normally the Chariot, you would have an individual, they'd be maybe singing on their harp, playing on the harp, singing, not, driving the chariot forward with the reins. She may be, driving the chariot forward with the reins in this card, but there's this calm, this confidence, this peace, right? When you reestablish this joy, when you reestablish this confidence in yourself to be able to continue moving forward, this is where you're going to get that drive back. This is where you're going to have that forward momentum kind of come back in, right? And this is, something that takes practice, something that, is an embodiment. When I look at the Priest, this is our Hierophant card, right? We might think of the Hierophant as structure, tradition, but the thing to remember about the Hierophant or the Priest is that this is an embodied type of energy, right? You connect to your higher source, you connect to your guides, to your friends, to whatever encouragement, and you find whatever your role within this connection, but you're still a human being, right? You have your ups and downs, you're going to have your good moments, you're going to have your bad moments, but the key here is to remember to bring yourself back, to bring yourself back into this structure, to this role, to this embodiment, rather than just getting stuck and staying in that old type of an energy. And you do have gifts coming for you. This Four of Wands, right? The fairy girl here offering this mysterious egg to, the fairy boys, that if you've been watching for a little bit now, like, there's the possibilities. What could this be? Could be a phoenix, could be a dragon, could be anything, right? You have new potential that is open and available to you, that, when you're fulfilling your role, when you step back into an embodiment of whatever it is that, maybe somebody's looking up to you for, or whatever support that you provide, they in turn provide support back to you, right? These gifts. And this gift, the whole point is this heart opening, right? This Ace of Cups, right? You have the overflowing of emotional energy. Maybe you feel you didn't get a certain kind of connection that you wanted. Maybe you feel you didn't get, like a certain expression of love. But ultimately, the point isn't as much for you to just, feel like you are loved. Yes, definitely very important. But for you to become love, right? For that emotional and energetic outpouring to come from within yourself. That itself is actually what creates the more meaningful, lasting connections. It's what allows you to be able to ride the currents of life with the wheel of fortune, right? To be able to stay on top, to be able to stay centered when you are within your emotional sovereignty, within that peace within yourself and that joy. The life's ups and downs, the turning of the wheel, the various, seasons that you experience as, the zodiac, like as we move through the different cycles, you can stay on top, you can stay centered and be able to continue to, have a more positive experience to navigate the world, with, and that's where the inspiration comes in, right? Our Knave of Cups, the Page of Cups. In the Rider-Waite Smith, you would see, somebody, they've got the cup and the fish is jumping out of the cup. Very surprising, right? The universe has possibilities for you, has new things, new surprises and potentials for you. And this, comes in when you're able to maintain that equilibrium within yourself. And these surprises, this is where the Ten of Cups comes in, right? You start by centering yourself. You start by re-establishing your equilibrium, and then the surprises are the connections, the Ten of Cups, the fulfillment, the incredible emotional fulfillment, community, family, connection, right? Maybe some small little inspiration, maybe some small little connection will lead you to experiencing a larger connection than you had anticipated originally, okay? And, you have this Seven of Wands. In this deck, we have the two fairy boys that, they're egg hatched, and it is this dragon. And as the dragon's growing older, one of the fairies, he starts to realize, okay, this is a lot going on here, and maybe, this isn't for the best, where the other fairy boy, he really wants to stick with the dragon, he really wants to stick with whatever the possibilities, but there's this consolation, right? He's like trying to communicate to him, hey, bud, I don't think this is a good idea for us to hang on to this dragon. You might have people in your life who are able to offer feedback about, hey, this might be helpful for you, this might not be helpful for you. This community, this connection, the fulfillment provides more than just the emotional content. It provides growth, right? You might have strengths that complement somebody else's weaknesses. They would have strengths that complement your weaknesses. And, if you're honest enough, in your connections and your relationships to be able to accept, healthy feedback and healthy communication, that creates growth for you. In fact, you all end up growing together. You all end up prospering together. This Ten of Pentacles, that's your legacy energy, your abundance, your prosperity, right? When everybody is bringing their strengths to the table, when, you have your strengths and then other people have their strengths that they're bringing to the table, because these connections that you're allowing to form, you all prosper, you all grow, right? This harvest, this abundance is yours to share, right? You have that Ten of Cups, and now you have that Ten of Pentacles. So the connection, the emotional connection that comes in when you allow yourself to, be regulated, when you allow yourself to form these relationships, that absolutely is going to create so much possibility and prosperity for you. And this is a little bit of a give and take kind of process, right? With the temperance, she's got this vessel, she's, pouring into another one. You pour into others, others pour into you. And this is an alchemical process, this process of transformation to where, you grow from, somebody who, like you were doing it on your own and, you're doing fine, to when you have these connections with others, that like the back and forth, this, alchemical process when you're connecting with others, that really causes like, things to happen behind the scenes, right? We have this Seven of Swords. This is where, you're feeding into somebody else, and then the rest of this garden is growing up all around you, all these new possibilities, right? You nurturing others allows so much, of this garden, this connection, this, area that y'all are all sharing together to be able to grow, even if it's things that you aren't seeing that are behind the scenes. And it's for the purpose of helping you to let your guard down, okay? We have this Nine of Wands, which would be that guardedness, preparedness. But when we have it in reverse, I'm getting this impression of being able to let your guard down. And I feel like that's the important part here. Maybe you are feeling guarded. Maybe you're feeling defensive in certain ways that, make you have a little bit of a harder time connecting with other individuals. But the key here is this is about you letting your guard down, because this is where your calling comes in, judgment, right? The connection and communities that you are forming are related to your higher calling, right? You have the support both from, your guides on that internal kind of level, and then this connection, that you're forming with others forms some sort of an external support, and you all connect together for a greater purpose, for your rebirth, for really understanding who you are, your place in the world, your connection, your value, what you bring to offer. And that is, yet again, where that emotional sovereignty comes in, that King of Cups, right? This process feeds into itself, right? When you have those connections and you have that honest feedback and communication through those connections, this kind of helps to really, create even further stability in your emotions, in your, psychic senses, in your perceptions, and how you, meet life. And that's when you end up getting everything that you want, the world, okay? This is where the fulfillment, the conclusion, the success comes from, right? We had that full energy in the beginning, and by connecting with others, by building together, by growing together, and being honest with, the positive and the negatives, and, each person complementing each other's strengths and weaknesses, this wholeness, this completion is available to you and is available to everyone else around you. All right, friend, I hope this has been helpful for you. Hope this has offered you some encouragement. If it has, go ahead and leave me a like. Drop me a comment. If you don't know to comment, go ahead and leave a sunflower emoji for me. That is a spirit guide of mine, which will let me know that you see me. It also helps the algorithm a lot to be able to continue to, get my content out there to other people. If you're not subscribed already, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel. Click on that bell icon and hit all. You're not guaranteed to see a video anymore just because you're subscribed to a channel with the changes in the algorithm. Then head into my channel, find a video that resonates with you, and I will see you in the next one.